So, Christians, if you saw the invite tonight when I sent it out, which is about 10 minutes before, because I know people will see it for the most part, one of the things that I wrote in the invite or attached to the invite was that I said, no more bubblegum Christianity. No more bubblegum Christianity. Insinuating that we are now getting into territory where many ministers in the pulpit refuse to talk about the things that we're going to start talking about tonight. Paul has set us up in 7 chapters and halfway through chapter 8, which is where we are tonight, to get us to a place where we are able to embrace a truth so significant that when understood, you will understand your invincibility as a believer. Your invincibility as a believer. And this is so important that Christians understand. The great preacher, Charles Spurgeon, he said these words. He said, "We are invincible until such time that the Lord calls us home," which means that we ought to live without any fear whatsoever. Nothing can be done to us that is not ordered by God, which is why the apostle would say to us, as he did in verse 28 of Romans 8, "We know that all things work together for good to them who are called according to his purpose." Very important verse. We went over this last night. In fact, we closed our discussion last night on this verse. We know, Paul says, and I emphasize over and over again to everybody that term, we know. Paul's talking to believers, and he's saying what believers most assuredly know and understand, which is what? That all things work together for good. All things without exception, work for good to them that love God. To those who love God, who are also called according to his purpose. And so now we're going to definitely get into an area of scripture that without doubt, this would be considered the meat of biblical Christianity. The meat. If all you're used to doing is consuming milk, you might want to prepare yourself, because this is not for the squeamish among the Christian believers. And it's interesting that I have to say these things, because what we're about to talk about right now are things that Paul the apostle is saying that is intended to add more to your comfort and your security and your assurance in this most holy faith. My sister Cindy says she's a carnivore. So am I. I'm with you, sister. This is not for milk drinkers. This is not for milk drinkers. This is for meat eaters, people who are ready to consume truth and are willing to take their minds and hearts to a different level of understanding. And Lord willing, I would like to be a part of that. I would like to be a part of that. So now we read verse 29. Paul says, he says, for whom he did foreknow. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Let me read this again. This is a heavy verse. And there are many people out there who call themselves Christians who will give you all kind of lies about what this means, when it cannot be any plainer. It can't be any plainer. I don't care how deep you go into Koine Greek, and I've been there, so I know what it says. I understand exactly what it says. And so he says, for whom? For whom? He did foreknow. He also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Let me read verse 30. Verse 30 says, moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called. And whom he called, them he also justified. And whom he justified, them he also glorified. Oh, yes. It's going to be a mess if you are unwilling to accept basic biblical truth explained in the most simplistic of terms. This is not going to be a problem for the believer. Yes, Tiffany, we're in Romans chapter 8. This is not going to be a problem for the believer, but it will be a problem for those unbelieving Christians. So let's get into this. Verse 8, or chapter 8 of Romans, verse 29. And let me read it one more time. I like being repetitive, so bear with me, because I want you to understand the impact of what is being said. For whom, whoever it may be. It says, for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate. To what end? To be conformed to the image of his Son. This is the result of the first cause, which was those whom he foreknew. His foreknowledge of you is the first cause of your salvation. And we're going to talk about it. But he says that if he foreknew you, he also predestinated you to be conformed to the image of his Son, which means that there is no scenario where the person whom God foreknew and did predestinate, there is no scenario where they do not end up being conformed to the image of his Son. So there is no possible way of a loss of salvation. And he does this so that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. This verse here, Romans 8:29, it explains why it is that believers can possess an absolute, unequivocal confidence that all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose, as we see in verse 28. All things work together for the good of them who are called according to his purpose. That's what we know is clear. Even the most wayward of unbelieving Christians will look at that verse as a solid verse of comfort. Even those who believe you can lose your salvation. But Paul here is now beginning to explain Paul here is now explaining why we have this confidence that all things work together for our good. Now Paul is getting ready to tell you why. And so the certainty that we have that all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose, this certainty rests not upon circumstances. It does not rest upon human experiences. It doesn't even rest upon human faithfulness. It doesn't even rest upon the believer's perseverance considered in and of itself. But Paul is showing that our salvation rests upon the certainty of our salvation. The absolute certainty of our salvation rests upon one thing: God's eternal purposes. His eternal purpose. Your salvation rests upon that. Not on your overcoming, not over your endurance, not over your post-believing law-keeping, but the certainty that you are saved rests solely upon one thing: God's eternal purpose, his eternal ordination, his eternal decree, his eternal will. That's what it depends on. So all these people who tell you about all this obedience that they do after coming to Christ, they are lying. And they are deceived. And they want to deceive you. Let them have what they will. But these people who believe in law keeping, especially after having come to Christ, that they believe that there's still something they can add to it, is blasphemous. It is blasphemous. They are saying that what Christ did on the cross was not complete and can only be completed by you. So listen to what he says in verse 29. For whom he did foreknow. Whom he did foreknow. This, Christians, the term foreknow, Paul says, whom he did foreknow. This does not mean, nor is it referring to God's simple and bare awareness of you or of future events surrounded around you or foresight that you as an individual would believe. I need to get you to a place where you understand there is a difference between God's foresight and God's foreknowledge. We're talking about two different things. There's a difference between foresight, and there's a difference between that foresight and foreknowledge. What does knowledge mean? Knowledge means to know. This should not be lost on anyone listening. Knowledge means what you know. If you have knowledge, you know something. Foresight means you see something that is going to happen that has yet to happen. And God does have foresight, but his foresight is based on what he foreknows, and his foresight is based on what he has already ordained. So God knows what's going to happen because he ordered it to happen. It is part of his divine counsel, his decree, his sovereign will. So because he has established what is going to happen, of course he knows what's going to happen because he's the one who decided what is going to happen. But foreknowledge, it speaks of something different. It speaks of something very different. And I want to bring clarity to your minds. I want to remove all ambiguity from people's minds and unclutter your minds and thoughts about what you may have heard from other people when they try to deal with this situation, this doctrine that so many people want to make it so complicated that we should even talk about it. Let me tell you something. It is not complicated. Predestination or in the foreknowledge of God, these are not complicated. These are not complicated. They're easy. The problem is with man's will, and wanting to be his own sovereign, his own Lord. It is his rebellion that keeps him from seeing the simplicity of these things. This is the problem here. So we need to distinguish between foresight and foreknowledge. Foreknowledge has nothing to do with looking down through time and seeing what a person will do, and then God making a decision to save them based on that. That would be foresight, even if it were true, which it is not. We're talking about foreknowledge. This is different. This has in it intimacy. When you know something, you understand it, you have a connection to it. You know it. And the fore part means that you know something, you know this beforehand. But the knowledge part it conveys with it this idea of an intimate connection. And trust me, I'm going to prove it. And when I get done, none of you will have any choice but to believe it. No choice but to believe it. So throughout Scripture, we see God's foreknowledge. And what it does is his foreknowledge denotes his sovereign, covenantal love. His love. Foreknowledge has to do with God's sovereign, covenantal love. And because it is called foreknowledge, speaking about beforehand, it is therefore talking about his love of you before. Before what? Before the foundation of the world. Before the foundation of the world. A prior setting. Foreknowledge speaks to a prior setting by God of his affection on a people whom he has chosen for himself. Why is that hard to understand? Every woman who bears a child should know what this means. The moment you are impregnated, you have a love for this child before that child is born. God has given you ladies an intimate insight into this very thing. There is something that happens before that child is born within a mother's heart that gives her a ferocious love for this child before it is born. And no matter how much a man may love that child before it's born, it doesn't compare to the love of a mother. We're just talking here. And we're just getting warmed up here. And I intend to leave no stone unturned. Because I want to convince you all of this. Foreknowledge speaks of God's love of you as individuals and all of us as a collective, his love for us before we were born. And when you tie this foreloving or this foreknowledge of God before the foundation of the world, and you tie this to his nature, it means that his love for you